Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Mix and Mash Battle Lounge stream with the 2MK team. The allergies strike again, but I'm going to try to power through it today and continue to talk at least a little more than I normally do under this condition. And if you find that my voice is annoying at this point, just mute me because I'm probably not going to be talking about anything too heavily important, as we are looking around for potential opponents in the wild lands that are Street Fighter V battle lounges. You will not be able to easily find us today as a result of this. If you're watching the stream, it might be possible to find a specific person. But assume that we are wandering around rather than easily accessible. At least for the time being. We may switch up later depending on how things are going. But it's a little bit hard to tell because the reports I'm getting are that people are definitely appearing. Some lounges can be joined, but the person in it isn't actually playing at the moment. The ones that are playing, I don't see the lounges, so I can't join them. Lots of information to have and go through quickly coming in from the 3 members that are playing today. But unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to see much in terms of matches. This one, however, I should have gotten into. Alright, we'll see what we get. After the initial burst of speed through which the game will rush us through OmniRabbit's match. Looks like we've got Ed versus Laura. Laura doesn't have as many tools for this in main situations as Akuma does. This tends to be a pretty even matchup in the sense of what happens in neutral. But Ed does take a lot more damage than a lot of other characters when he actually makes a mistake. And Laura, similarly, can be thrown off her game by the number of ways that Ed can just ignore things she does, or just go for EX uppercut, so on, and reach further than a lot of other characters automatically do. Wait, when did he get an EX version of that move? I'm here learning things already. Unfortunately, that's too low health to be doing that, and I guess Omni's taught this player that today. Always good to have something in your replays to give you new information or about a character. Well jumped there. I feel like they're going to have to increase their amount of throws though. Now, they don't necessarily know that that's the weakness of their opponent, but at some point you have to go for it simply because people who block for long enough are very, very successful in this game. Generally, just because of it. No V cancel. Not sure it would have been an actual thing that worked, but I was expecting more V cancels by now. Yep, there's that way out of that. Oh right, that would be why no V cancels, because it's not the V trigger that works. Should have been paying obvious attention to that. So you're now seeing it working out just about as you'd expect it to. Ed can absolutely break out of Laura's momentum by taking bigger risks than some other characters are capable of taking. And she can't necessarily overwhelm this with spacing alone. Unfortunately, from the Ed side, if you start playing too start playing too back away from her, I think you're usually doing yourself a disservice. Not necessarily a large one, it's good to have like the betweens, but it's kind of a problem to be just backing off because she doesn't really have to chase you. She has the clap, she has control of many situations, and even here where the raw activation might in fact work, the benefit would come out without Laura being able to necessarily do something explicitly. Oh, there we go. It's the same sort of thing. You do have to respect the idea that players will sometimes just break out of your stuff. But one thing that can help you to become a better player yourself, especially if you play a lot of offense, is to recognize which characters or which players you don't really care if they do that. Because the situation where Laura needs to focus the most is there a position here where my opponent can hurt me if I let them get away? So for now, for example, letting Ed get away in this scenario is basically a good point to be going for all of the time here. He doesn't have enough damage yet to be scary. Meaning she can also back off if she wants and not pressure so hard in certain situations. And we're still there, more or less. A little laggy now. Ooh, well spaced. And there you have a problem, because she could have done something there, but it's the same concept. Will your opponent break out? Can you die if they break out? Do you need to go catch them in order to benefit from your situation? Second reason why you don't do that to this character in neutral. Good faking jump, but I'm not really sure it wouldn't have worked the other way had the Ed just done the uppercut. I know Psycho Rising would have whiffed there, but uppercut is something you also have to be ready for. Sometimes you just hit a heavy punch. More good spacing. Note that this isn't about patience, because patience allows the Ed player to move their position as they see fit. And that will happen. If you keep on letting Ed do things at the range Ed prefers to do them, you will be constantly putting yourself under stress because you shouldn't respond, you shouldn't counterattack, you'll often get whiff punished, but Ed can just do it forever. Yeah, they're gonna need more throws for this. Still, this is a good match in the sense of, here is a clear thing that you can do here. There's a specific, I can improve this match, I can improve playing this matchup against this player by doing something differently. Not just, I'm doing it at all. Good fake out. But, again, well, now I feel as if they've probably learned the lesson the hard way. Fully, because to die that way twice is the sort of thing that sticks in your head. Is this person even around? Yes, they are. The connection isn't usually so bad, and we are usually checking out whether or not any given connection is terrible, but usually if it's not fluctuating, I'm not sure if us having good internet contributes much, but you definitely don't get as many bad situations in the same way. So feel free to join in if you live reasonable distance from the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, pretty much anywhere, and if you don't, you can still give it a try if you have good enough internet and could probably make it there. Midwestern United States, for our NA lounge, which is what you're looking at right now, is in fact valid. I don't believe we have any issues with the connection to people from that side. But of course, this lounge is already full because it was not created by us this week. We are mix and mashing, and that means the complexity of this matchup with the claps and the light kicks and more claps and more light kicks. One of the things that makes this matchup hardest for Omni is remembering what the core part of it is, the thing that makes it work for Lara, because it's really unintuitive. The thing that beats Cody most of the time is just stand medium kick. The reason the stand medium kick works is, again, really specific, has to do with the way that buttons and their hurt boxes and hit boxes interact. But it has to do with lots of things related to spacings for defending yourself, because it is one of the moves that keeps Cody out of your space while still basically whiff punishing certain spacings of ruffian kick, i.e. the ones you'd expect him to be using if he was trying to play defensively. You can see the same sort of thing happen in matches between Akuma and Alex, for example. Akuma just wiggles around and hits medium kick in neutral, not because it's a great, like, I am about to get you because I'm doing this. It forces Alex to play differently, and that's where the core part comes in. You'll notice that the Cody player has immediately done the correct thing and adapted to no longer specifically playing defensive, no longer specifically playing zoning, has gone to, okay, now I'm going to try to play neutral with you. You've indicated to me by the buttons you're choosing to use that you expect and wish to play neutral, and we're not just going to have a weird off-put zoning game. And this comes up a lot in fighting games, and we end up trying to teach people this in really complicated ways, because you'll notice that we got this far and almost immediately the whole thing stopped happening. There is no more need to hit the medium kick, and there is no more general use of ruffian kick in neutral. Now we are down to the point of something slightly better, because normally Cody's players don't use the knife against Lara because it's usually kind of wasteful, I find. Now, this is not something that everyone thinks, but we've definitely seen it chosen more so the other way, because you want to lock her down from certain momentum spaces. But when you have a Lara who will force you into playing neutral, the knife is a useful thing to have, simply because it changes your neutral. The pipe also changes your neutral, but it's not the same sort of thing. So, there isn't a specific thing to be learnt here. These players are just both playing Street Fighter and understand the matchups enough to get each other's stuff done.
Round one. Fight.
That was a sign of having relatively high awareness as well. It's a good psychological trick that when you don't have use of a move anymore because your opponent has countered it in some way, but that move is a decent opening gambit, you might as well use it. And the reason you might as well use it is that it reminds them, yes, I still have this move. For some players that's a shock. It's a, oh wait, are we doing this again? And they'll immediately try to change. But that's not what happened, and it's not likely to be what happens. This is still the basically better way of fighting this matchup against a Lara that is very aware of the requirements. But just by going, yeah, here's a random ruffian kick in neutral at the beginning, you get the possibility of putting certain players on edge, on tilt, and they end up thinking about it. Reversal blocked? Yes. But not a kill, because it's Cody.
Final round.
The key therefore is don't break emotionally. Don't break if you get thrown, don't break if your opponent does a thing you don't expect, don't even break in that scenario where you got neutral jumped on your super. Because if the super itself was a bet to begin with, then accept that you lost the bet. It can be a big deal, it can even lose you the round, but the point wasn't that you chose the super because you felt, oh yeah, this is definitely going to kill. Or if you did, then think about why you thought that. But there is at least some point where you decided, I'm going to bet. And while it's difficult to get used to, if you're the type that watches high-level matches, surely these things happen to them less often because they are the ones who will not do the thing when it's a mistake, a raw mistake as much. But they will still do it when it's a 50-50. They will still do it when it's a 40-60, and they'll just bet on this. Looks like someone has left, and that unfortunately cuts their match short. But at least they did it between rounds, so I guess I'll probably, if I'm not at back, okay, I am at back, so it's fine. I would drop to back and let them have their matches again. We'll just consider this to be closer to first to 3 set-wise now. That should work out. Oh, we have a switch. This is hard to tell because there is once again a single button that more or less solves this matchup. It forces the situation to be a fair one instead of allowing Urien to use dominant strategies against Lara. Just crouch heavy punch alone from Lara can make Urien's life really miserable. Especially if you've got good enough defense to not get hit by his other stuff. Oh, well done. That was not necessarily what you'd expect, but here is one of the main problems. You'll end up wasting a lot of this energy. So I think we're going to assume that this player's style of Urien is based on their mastery of armor, not on their mastery of anything specific other than armor. The only reason I can think of why you would choose Tyrant Slaughter as your main V trigger and then use it this specific way is either because you don't really understand the character or because you are good at Urien armor setups. And so far, the fact that they're willing to set up for armor, even in neutral where they could be doing other things, indicates we're going to have a very fun match with someone who has a completely different concept of how to play Urien than a lot of the people you might meet online. This is not something that Omni's entirely unfamiliar with. It's more so that you only tend to find this in certain places in the world, let's say. Around here, this isn't the sort of gutsy style you might expect from the players that we face in our local area. Which, on the one hand, makes it really fun, and on the other hand, can make it really frustrating because now it's like, oh right, people play like this, but all my practice is the other type. And because this is one of those things where it is practice that you're dealing with here. It isn't directly, I can't do this. Oh, now they've switched back again, maybe? I can't even tell. And gone. Alright, we're dispersing from here then. I'm not sure what the aim was there, but maybe they picked Urien by mistake, who knows. So I am now off on another search to find out where the rest of the team ended up. reports so far that Billy Graves doesn't seem to want a certain type of matchup. Outlaw Panda isn't responsive. Jinx is only 3 bars to me at least. And what else we got? Probably nothing. Alright then, I guess that means we're going to have a temporary regular lounge. And it is about halfway through, which is when our other members and other guests tend to start to show up, so lounge creation time it is. I won't be throwing out invites because of the way Street Fighter does that, causing issues on stream, but usually Omni and JustVine at least can find me, and I believe that DeWolf is already in combat, so let's at least see if we get anything. We've got 3 rounds, first to 2. Character select is on today. Note that if we don't see a specific person or no one joins us for a specific amount of time, we'll probably be rotating out of this one after a couple matches. Probably, I can't really say, I would assume it's like 13 minutes, whatever that timing is. So 8-10 Eastern, this will probably break up again. Or at least some people will ditch out and see if they find anything between matches. I was supposed to do this, and I was supposed to do this because there was one thing I needed to test. So I am playing Bison today, and the thing I need to test is probably not related to the mirror match. But I remember being... There we go. Yes, I remember being told there was some Juri testing to do, and Juri versus Chun is not really the thing that you do the testing with. So, normally I'd be completely against this because the rust on this character is high and Bison is hard enough to play now that I wouldn't want to play Rusty. But, since this is again just passing time between other training, there's a specific way to play Bison neutral that is going to be probably important going forward for Juri, because there are going to be players and characters within Street Fighter 6 that play very similarly to what I'm about to do. Hopefully I lose badly. We're basically working on Jamie related things. Jamie appears to be a character who will put you in positions that you can't necessarily avoid, but not care that you try to avoid them, sort of. Which means you end up fighting just outside his range for a very long time, but have to be able to confirm everything, and that's how Juri has always worked. One of the problems, therefore, that our Juri player is expecting to see in her play is simply that this is hard to do for her executionally sometimes. Did not cancel it. Because that is a similar thing to the setup I'm talking about. Bison's motions, Bison's concept of how to fight certain matchups goes similar to the Jamie, I'm now hitting things because I can. But the which moves are intentional, which moves are I'm actually trying to hurt you, versus which moves are no, I'm just messing with your head now, is going to require a lot of push on things like that. Missed it. The main thing Jamie seems to be, from the few things we've seen, and I shouldn't say few because I watched like the whole 40-minute thing, is that Jamie is just the new concept of Rashid. Rashid, is, as he is, probably doesn't work well in Street Fighter 6's style. He would probably not be the sort of character you'd want to let start with meter. Just random EX everywhere, he just becomes annoying. Also, he's very V-skill dependent, so taking it away from him means you don't have the same character in the first place. So, it might be good to think of that as your option. Now, he shouldn't have that, but he does have things that give you similar concepts, where you want to block. It is clearly in your best interest to block. But whether or not the character actually has a trick is pretty irrelevant. That situation was a simulation of what happens when you are low enough on drive gauge that you have to care about the burnout, but aren't burnt out yet. Your optimal scenario is, I should keep blocking before this situation gets worse. And this is a very realistic thing to have to deal with in that game so far. So you can just imagine this as a year or so in the future, this is me doing the equivalent of Jamie nonsense. The answer to this so far that we've discovered from watching a lot of matches is don't defend too much. Or rather, don't count on your defense for any length of time. You need to switch to offense earlier, especially when you're not sure if Jamie is actually being serious about like the spacing he's at. It doesn't work as well on Bison because Bison is usually quote-unquote serious about the spacing he's at. Because the other thing I'm expecting from Jamie players is that they're going to be really fearless. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. It's been more and more common in games these days for there to be characters against whom the gap is visible to the point where it's not unrealistic, even for probably a beginner, to be able to go, I wonder if I could hit that, instead of, oh, my opponent keeps doing this thing I can't do anything about. And, you know, the community is nice enough to at least tell you, even if harshly, you're just getting hit because you're not trying. There's a way out of the situation that you're just not using. You might not want to hear it in the way that a lot of people will give you this information, but, you know, it's still useful information. But the thing you will often need is to become comfortable watching scenarios by spacing, and being comfortable on defense enough to not flinch. By not flinch, we mean, I am just going to try the response. I'm not going to worry about whether or not the response works. I know that if it fails, I will lose. That's it. There's no more thinking to be done. Did I hit it at the right time or not? And we can expect to have a good training mode available. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Jamie is what if Bison was a fast character, but didn't hit as hard. deserved that, but technically a correct move regardless. And I don't think that they're likely to fix that quote-unquote weakness of Juri's. That she has what we call light hitboxes. You can easily collide with Juri's moves and knock her out of them rather than being beaten because her situation was somehow better. In fact, this is so common that we consider this to be one of the main weaknesses of the character in this game period. It's a decent trade-off for her neutral, but it can be really stressful when you are first starting out to be doing moves, hoping that you're going to get away with it, and then dying terribly. But combos are hard. Blitz. And that was a perfect example. It would be the sensible thing to do to keep defending there. But doing the sensible thing isn't necessarily what you'd want. You get so much more reward for just stopping the defense, forcing your opponent to think differently, than you do from, what? Standing there and blocking more? It would have just been me hitting Psycho Burst and retaining control of the situation. Ooh, that dash was off. And I think that was entirely my fault. Which means my opponent probably saw that the dash was off. This is not a matchup where I think to myself, I should switch to Bison. Because I know that the player I'm facing is doing this a specific way to train something. Though I would not say that Juri versus Bison favors either character particularly heavily. Oh, the panda has shown up. But that does not actually mean they're going to play matches, because I think sometimes they just join stuff to hang around. You know what, I might just well do that again, because technically Omni needs the same conceptual thing. The idea of playing this character as oppressive is required because the gaps you're seeing in my attempted offense are based on taking advantage of the fact that the opponent will keep defending. And this is something you can build up as a general skill when you face against certain very specific types of twitchy players. There are people who just defend forever, and then there are people who defend until they believe it's safe, which is a good way to play until you meet someone like me who is doing this sort of thing. At which point you have to go, okay, I should stop defending maybe a little earlier, or stop defending under a different condition, so that I don't have to deal with this. When people talk about fake pressure or fake setups, that's usually what they mean. A character or player who isn't actually threatening you, they're just making you think that they are going to threaten you and then using something else. Here, for example, I want to hit this, but I'm not hitting that with any intention of actually kicking my opponent. It is because I expect my opponent will see me coming forward, see the startup of something, and think, oh, I should defend a thing. Because none of these moves I'm doing are intended to hit my opponent at all. Not even that one was. There's a lot of stuff you can do, though, that will hit them if they move, especially if they try to react to it. But if they continue to defend, it will not do anything, and it won't necessarily put you in danger. This is the way that I play Bison best, but it's not necessarily a great way to play Bison. That, for example, is me choosing to get hit there because the knockdown for that doesn't have an obvious good... This is the meaty I'm supposed to use. This, for example, is similar. This is a setup not for dealing with the clap or getting the thing I want, but to get to a specific space. So I've been thinking about that for a really long time before now. That, on the other hand, was just me messing up. And that is the perfect reaction to have to Bison activating that V-trigger under nearly any circumstance. I think I crouch blocked that. But that was a perfect example again. Immediately deciding, okay, I'm clapping now. Because, I don't know, maybe it's the right time to clap, I'm just gonna do it. To continue defending would have been a bad idea, but to just clap because, The problem you will face is that stronger Bison players will convert way better off these things than I will. You can tell when I'm doing well versus not, simply by the fact that my opponent is trained to hit these, or throw them. But if I'm doing well enough, that's not what's going to happen. This is another setup. Notice the scenario we're in now. There we go. But the clap was the solution to that. I was not expecting the clap. I was expecting my opponent to remain afraid because I could just Psycho Crusher. And you could Psycho Crusher through the clap. But we got far enough into layers that Omni's thought was probably more toward the line of, you want me to be scared to do this, so I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway and take, what, the single hit of damage from the Psycho Crusher? The faster you get at checking your opponent's meter, the easier it is to tell, oh, I shouldn't stay in this situation. This is bad. My opponent is trying to trick me. They want me to think this way. You know who's really good at this if you're used to watching high-level players? Itazan does this to people all day. Itazan sets up throw situation loops from the beginning of the round, and sometimes it will take him 30 seconds. And I'm convinced he does, yes, literally all of it on purpose. 30 seconds to get to the point where you're just going to get SPD 3 times. So now that I know my opponent won't fear, and has that available, I need them to use up a certain thing before I do this. So that now, I have at least one option. But nope, still ready. This training is relatively hard to do because when someone understands enough about the way you like to fight, that the situation keeps on changing, from both sides, you end up wishing you knew more about, like, character bits. For example, I've never learned exactly... I went into that on purpose. I got hit by that clap on purpose, but I am not sufficiently familiar with this character to know what I should have done after that. There's a clap. Now obviously you'd think that my response to this should be, oh, I should use the Psycho Crusher to actually go through the clap. But that's not really the point here. Because I wouldn't get much out of this. I have to be much better at Bison, and depending on the spacing, I will just get nothing at all. the rapid cycling of options through your head is what you're aiming for here. That, for example, could easily have been a stomp on Laura's head had Omni not been ready, followed by a drop, in which case it would have been, okay, well, I'm going to sway that, and then I'd have just supered. Because Omni having super meant this is the maximum amount of time I can spend in a state where you can't hit me with it. You can't hit me with super, you can't hit me with armor, you just can't do anything. It looks like the panda is in fact around, and I think this player normally actually plays Sagat. So since we would have probably just gone looking for them anyway, we get to move on a bit. With Sagat it's usually a little easier, because the thing you're trying to think about isn't so much am I on defense, but am I too close? Where too close is anything closer than mid-screen. You do not want to be at mid-screen on Sagat's terms, basically ever, because you can't jump from there, you can't consistently block Tiger Knee, you can't get away from Tiger Knee, you can't necessarily react in time to get past fireballs. In fact, I can't think of a situation where a character who doesn't have a random EX safe move wants to be at mid-range on Sagat's terms. The way we avoid this is somewhat risky, but it's not more risky than normal, so let's talk about contrasting the two types of risks one is taking to do this. If you back off as much as possible whenever you realize, oh, I'm at mid-screen and this Sagat player is not on the ground. They haven't done a move, they don't have a fireball on screen that I've just outmaneuvered. We're just standing here in neutral at mid-screen. Move, preferably backward, and then jump. The Sagat player will therefore take one of two options. They will dash up at you to take the space you've just given them, which is usually correct, or they'll stay in their mental mode of, yeah, I'm still watching you zone me, or rather, I'm still zoning you, and that will usually mean that they mess up the zoning. Because if you're far enough away from Sagat, you can jump into Sagat space without necessarily being risking uppercuts, no guaranteed hits from Tiger Knee, and even if you got hit by the fireball, you were going to get hit anyway. That's the whole point of the thing. This is particularly true when you're this sort of character, where you actually have a solution to that mid-range fireball throw, but you don't want to use too much of it. You don't have enough meter for this purpose. Your hope is that your opponent will forget and not notice, oh, the reason they haven't moved away this time is because they're actually prepared. And if you are prepared, you can stay there if you want to, but it's not necessarily a thing you want to do. Here, for example, it wouldn't be a good thing to go for because the Sagat player has full meter, and that means that if you miss time or misunderstand anything, you're going to take a super to the face. Right, it's just a tiger. You get hit by tigers all the time. But by doing this, you have massively increased the amount of things that the player has to think about, from, okay, I need to throw this fireball so that when you move, you get hurt, to, why are you all the way over there? Should I be coming at you? Should I be doing something? No, none of that is important. From the Sagat side, the thing you want to do is move forward. Every time your opponent gives you that space by dashing backward to try to be confusing, dash forward, take it, because the number of characters in this game that can counter-attack you for doing that, especially out of their own bat dash in time, is so small as to be irrelevant to you. The worst outcome is that you end up corner guarding someone instead of zoning them, and a lot of players, as they get better, can do both of those things at the same time, so get used to the idea that this character can be played by zoning people until they let you dash forward instead of backing off so that your opponent has trouble reaching you, because it's not true. That's part of Sagat's weakness as a zoner. Your opponent does not in fact ever have to be so afraid of you and you're zoning, that you backing off is a win condition. Maybe if you have like full meter of both types and your opponent is really impatient, but to be clickbaity about it, with this one simple trick you can just solve the whole thing. Right there, that moment, it's just stress for Outlaw Panda. And it's a good thing for Outlaw Panda to be working on here, because that stress is relatively not a thing you can easily train, I guess. Once you've fallen into the rhythm of zoning properly, so to speak, you don't care anymore. I think I would have gone for ES uppercut there. It probably would have worked, but it would also have been a very, very panicky thing, and a waste of meter had it failed. This, for example, is giving your opponent the situation to beat you. You have walked backward so far that they can now jump. Or use meter to get corner guard pressure up. And Sagat is not exactly the best at getting out of corners. This is a massive use of energy, with a relatively minimal benefit. The better you are at Sagat damage conversions, the more effective this is as a whole, so there's that. You can definitely switch between the two, but that usually involves not being stressed and therefore not failing the execution of whatever it is you're trying to do. That was a good try, but I'm not really sure it was going to work no matter what. You can almost see the stress. I can't be sure that this player is stressed, but I feel like you can almost see it. And that's the primary reason anything is happening negative to them at all. It's not about this character can't do this. Because if you watch someone do the same thing for a while, it'll definitely be just Sagat zoning perfectly for a while. But you need to learn, in general, to break through your opponent's first order strategy as quickly as possible. Are we going to see Juri versus Lauren here? I'm not sure it would necessarily matter a lot, because we still don't know what Juri's redesign will be like, only that she's very likely to have some changes. So, it wouldn't necessarily be worth it. Bison versus Laura is a much easier to understand matchup, and much more challenging when you are the one facing the different ways you can be killed, i.e. the Laura side. Because Bison only tends to lose this matchup one way, is that avoiding that one way is difficult. But Laura can fall in all sorts of ways, and that means you do have to keep up with what I was saying before. Sometimes you just have to go, yeah, I don't care though. This is particularly useful because of one thing we consistently say, more so as a way of encouraging Omni. Life leads are not real against Laura. She doesn't even need meter for that to be true. Life leads are just not real. If you have enough understanding of your psychology, of the psychology of your opponent, they just die. It doesn't matter that you have a life deficit. There are a few characters in the game where a trade is likely to happen, but the key thing to understand here is that you aren't necessarily counting on big Laura momentum to cause that to be true. It's simply that she has so many good options for tricking and moving through people's stuff to get what she wants, compared to many other characters, then you just don't care. We're talking about a character that basically literally has a perfect dodge and a slightly less than mid-screen command grab that goes through fireballs. So you don't actually have to play very offensively minded for that to be true. You just have to be in a state of zen readiness. And that is literally the primary thing you'll notice from particularly good Laura players. Idom is practically famous for it, even though it's hard to understand it, because the way Idom talks, at least from what we've experienced, would give you the impression of, oh yeah, I think about these things a lot. But compared to some other people with much more stress, no. It's also helpful that, much like Honoka from DOA, Ami's other character, there's a lot of time where the hit stun of what is happening is quite long compared to other characters. And everything is basically a known factor. You don't hit this button and it hits slightly differently here than it did in other places. When Lara makes contact, you pretty much know what is about to happen or not happen. There are very few scenarios in which Lara collides with someone or trades with someone where the outcome is particularly unpredictable. And that means you can enter this Zen state even if the only thing keeping you there in a stressful matchup is block stun. Kind of helpful that she is very good at keeping block stun going for quite a while. You can literally use pressure strings just to calm yourself down, and not actually as a setup to the command grab. Which is really frustrating for people who eventually expect you to go for the command grab and try to get out of it, because you just keep on hitting them anyway. JustVine is also using V-Trigger 2 in this matchup, and because of the general interaction between these two, doesn't often need to actually use V-reversals, even though the blocking can be a problem sometimes. Every time you can basically freeze time for a moment with Lara is a moment to not take a full breath, but just recognize, yeah, it's fine. Same as always. She has a lot of time to think, which is a really good outcome for this character design, because Judo, I'm told, feels a lot like that. And while she is, strictly speaking, Jujitsu, the point of the way you are supposed to play Lara under many circumstances is closer to the Judo mindset as I know it. Leverage is the only thing that matters, and everything else is just an illusion almost. If you've ever wondered why a Judo practitioner looks at a boxing match and doesn't think to themselves, I will get my face pounded in, what am I even doing here? It is because they don't think about that part. Fighting will always involve the option from your opponent to try to bash your face in. But the amount of things they have to do to get to bashing your face in space kind of matters. That similarly was recognizing, okay, I'm being corner guarded. Like, I can feel that I'm being corner guarded. And that means I shouldn't necessarily try to get out of here. I can just stay here until my opponent starts to think, oh, well, you're just staying there, so I should come get you. Some people don't think like that, and you end up getting in a punish, and some people do think like that, and you might get hit. But what is your option? Trying to jump out of corner guard with Lara? You're not going to get very far that way. That, I feel, happened and worked only because JustVine realized Omni had no meter left. Because with meter, that would at least have been a bet. Because you don't absolutely know when you are there sitting at low health, just as with our Ed earlier, you don't know that you won't get armor traded to death. And given the requirements of that hit in order to get enough damage, I'm feeling like Lara would have survived that. Sweeps are making me wonder whether or not Omni has noticed a specific thing that comes up, or whether it's just, I'm in the mood to do sweeps, so I'm doing it. The specific thing in question being that if you as Bison don't hit heavy punch in neutral often enough, Lara can just hit sweep for free. The reasons for this I can't call complicated, but it's mostly related to his relatively poor startup on certain things. But now, the situation is a little different. The meter is available, corner guarding is happening. Jump over? No. I think I would have bet on the jump over. Now neither of them has anything to do with this. And this is precisely the situation I'm talking about. You have to bet something eventually. Or, you know, wait for the other person to make a mistake if you're the one with the correct amount of health. You do find a lot of players online who will specifically run away in order to make that situation last as long as possible. But here we are still just training, and a lot of training for fighting games is just straight nerves. Do you have the nerve to be at trade point with 10 seconds left and still be thinking about offense instead of running away? You have the life lead, even if it's only by a pixel, but no, I'm going in. As an acquaintance of ours says, friend of some, acquaintance of others, never stop going in. Or at least never stop thinking about it, because the possibility of doing it means you always can take your opponent off guard and make their world change relatively quickly. Ami was noting a need to practice V shift without actually using the counter. This is particularly true for Bison and other characters who advance themselves on you in the corner. They have stretched this out a while, slightly longer than expected, but I believe the stream length, or rather the video later on length, will be still about right because we did start a little late. With our preference for keeping streams to an hour now, it means that this is the last on-stream match of the night. But it was totally worth it. And I believe I did cover nearly everything that would likely have been talked about today. Omni has too much meter to be just whiffing heavy kick and neutral now. But we see the heavy punch is back. Unfortunately, the spacing was not good enough to make that one free enough. But that was a bunch of mental interactions happening at once. The sort of thing that you will not learn from our bots, which you can find at 2-mk.org. But you can learn by tuning in to our streams. Information about which you will find on our Twitter 2_mk_FGC. But with that intense match over, so is the stream. The lounge will stay open for a while, probably. And you can see we have one slot left in it. So hop in if you want to, and you can expect that some people are going to drop to back, and you'll get your turn faster than you might expect from the 7 people in it now. This has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.
Round two. Fight. Final round. Fight.
It's not obvious, Mika, but the answer to this is Psycho Axe. Not all the time, just those, what are we doing right now? Moments.
Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight. Final round. Fight. wins. It's go time. Let's do this.